We will bring you the police news conference from Tennessee once it starts. In the meantime, are patriotism and hard work a thing of the past in Joe Biden's America? The left's endless bashing of the United States showcased in a stunning new poll. Just 38% of Americans say patriotism is very important to them, a severe drop from 70% in 1998. And worse, there are now less Americans who respect and appreciate hard work. It's no wonder when the White House is focused on equity and handouts.
This is about equity and whether or not we are truly committed to the principles of equity in every way that we as government and as a society can enforce those important principles.
One of the reasons I'm so optimistic about this nation is that today's generation of young Americans is the most progressive, thoughtful, inclusive generation that America has ever seen, forcing us to confront the huge gap in economic inequity. And yes, forcing us to confront systemic racism and white supremacy.
The obsession with woke is being driven by liberals. 56% of Democrats want companies taking a public stance on social and political issues, while 80% of Republicans oppose it. And if you criticize the left's hyper-focus on being woke, then they will call you a racist.
The whole discussion about woke is really a dog whistle against African American, against Black people, against people of color. The things that they are deeming as woke are the things that are trying to make us a more inclusive country by having books, by letting our children learn about others other than themselves.
All right, Jesse, I'll start with you. It appears that, the left is pushing equity, which considers the outcome as opposed to equality of opportunity. And now we've got these numbers that are indicating that fewer and fewer people are even interested in working hard.
Well, hard work's been replaced by quotas. Everybody wants to be rewarded for something they didn't really deserve. Just because you look a certain way or you identify a certain way doesn't mean you deserve a job or a promotion. It used to be you worked hard, you get ahead, and now people want to get ahead just by the color of their skin or just because they wanted to sleep with some certain person. That doesn't matter. Also, they're against hard work because life's too easy now. You have an app for that. You can have someone come over and be your handyman, make your bed, do your dishes, deliver your food. Everyone has a butler in their phone, so that's also a part of it. The patriotism thing I understand because the farther away you get from World War II, the farther away you get from the Cold War, the less competitive you feel. As a country, it used to be communism versus capitalism, and now it's globalism. Now it's just about open markets, free trade, and America's the top guy, but you know what? We don't really deserve it, and we feel bad about our position. If you get to the war on terror situation, remember, that was more of a nuisance. They called it a global war, but that was like a pesky nuisance that you could mop up with surgical strikes. And then, remember, they were mad at us because it was our fault, and we can't fight back because we don't want to spark more Islamophobia. The Iraq War was a mistake. Afghanistan went on and on. So you don't really get that patriotism that we used to really feel what made us Americans.
Okay. So, Jessica, this poll shows a 22% drop in young adults ages 25 and below saying that they're extremely proud to be American. What is that about?
I think so. Across the board with the poll, all of the categories were split on age lines. So if you talk to senior citizens, they still feel good amounts of patriotism. They're still relatively religious, et cetera. So it's obviously a generational thing that's happening here. I think Jesse's right that there's so much distance now from what people generally consider to be a just war, right? Something that you want to support, maybe get involved with. And obviously post 9/11, the 9/11 moment itself was a great moment for American patriotism. We were all completely unified, and we really haven't had that since then. So I think it's about younger generations just generally feeling differently. I thought the money question was really interesting, too, about how that's the only thing Democrats and Republicans are, the value that's gone up, that everyone wants more money. But young people just see the world differently. And I think part of that is on us to do a better job articulating what makes our country special, why even if there are things that you don't like about the way the country works, that it's still better than a lot of other options. It does frustrate me, though, on the religion question. They never talk about spirituality, which has replaced religion for a lot of people. And I'm not saying that for those who are religious, that it's an equal thing. It's not just meditating, Jesse. Religion is very much, and I'm not, I don't go to synagogue regularly. I certainly identify and proud to be Jewish, but I understand religion more as being part of a community and having a support system. And you can get that very much through being a spiritual person. So I think that should be one of the questions.
You know, the truth is that, as Jessica says, you know, or Jesse said, the only priority that grew in importance was money. And that's amazing because COVID created a generation where everyone became accustomed to, you know, receiving money. They don't want to work. And in Biden's America, they just don't want to work. How do you rationalize those two extremes?
Well, and the government destroyed young people's future by the decisions that they made, whether it was in education or just taking away big life events like college graduation, high school state championships, things that shape you as a person for your future. That was taken away through years of overbearing COVID policy, whether it was on the federal level or on the state level. But when it comes to the question you had about being proud to be an American, when all of the institutions, government institutions, colleges, even elementary K through 12 education teaches young people that America is a bad country, we shouldn't be surprised that they don't have any feelings about patriotism, especially since they're young and they haven't traveled to the rest of the world to see how the rest of the world operates. So I'm not talking about going even to Europe, although Europe will make you appreciate America, but going to third world countries or seeing the despair that the rest of the world is in, or to just see the good things that America is doing around the world. The other thing I would say is that we've focused so much on equity, and 4 years ago, people said that tolerance was 80% of people said it was very important to them. Now it's down to 58%. They've been pushing equity as if that's going to make everybody more tolerant. It actually requires everybody to discriminate against one another and to see each other as their differences, not as the same, because you're looking for certain characteristics rather than judging everybody by the same standard and people who work the hardest get to the top. And instead, we're all judging each other by what makes us very different instead of the same.
All right, Greg, just 1 in 7 Americans think that the country is headed in the right direction. How do we change that around when every time Biden talks, he's blaming the Republicans?
Well, I think a lot of this was intentional over the last 20 or 30 years. What have we replaced patriotism with? We have replaced it with a different kind of pride. It's identity politics. We've gone from pride in our country to pride in our identity. So which one is better? You know, well, the media picked its horse, its identity. But pride in your country isn't necessarily, it's an idea. It's not like I'm proud to be an American. It's that I'm proud to be part of an idea that makes this country different. That is why anybody can be an American, right? They can come from anywhere, and and that's why we were known as the melting pot. We weren't supposed to notice parts of the melting pot, right? So, you know, the country as an idea was supposed to bring people together. But what we've done is we've replaced that unity with something with something that we weren't supposed to do, tribalism, right? Now it's everybody is their own sports team. And what happens is now you've got a new kind of pride. Which one's better? Well, identity politics is the worst kind of pride because, I mean, it's actually pathetic if you are proud of your identity. I mean, you had no hand in your identity, right? Should I be proud of being white because a white person invented the light bulb? Should I be proud of being white because a white person invented penicillin? I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm proud of the things that I do. That is why that's why Americans tend to be proud, is because we do things. And being part of an American is to be doing something as an American. Identity politics completely deflates that. Whether you're proud of your race or your sexuality, you have nothing to say for yourself. It's actually kind of sad.
I am very proud of my sexuality, actually.
You know what? You're the only
Jesse,
one. Everybody else is disgusted by yours.
Jesse, you want to expound on that for us?
No,
We don't want to know.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.